Well, everybody, it's Mike Griffith on this Monday. Welcome to the Ingles on the Beat segment. Come to you every Monday afternoon. Appreciate you joining me as we talk Georgia football, Georgia athletics in general. Might have to sneak a little basketball in there. The basketball team has been around some controversial happenings that have gone national. But I think the big news right now that seems to have everyone engaged is the Georgia schedule. And we're not talking about next year. We're talking about 2020. So I know a lot of Georgia fans that I talked to were really hoping that one day the SEC was going to give Georgia kind of a payback, because back in 2012 and 2013, when the league added Texas A&M and Missouri, one of the things that had to happen for the scheduling to work out was Georgia had to play consecutive years at Auburn. And that sure didn't seem very fair, and it certainly seemed like that Georgia worked with the league to the detriment of their own program. And so I think Georgia fans, rightly so, expected at some point the SEC would kind of right that situation, and Auburn would play 2 games in a row in Athens. Well, that didn't happen. Instead, word leaked out of an athletic director's meeting that the vote went down, and essentially Georgia is going to flip Auburn and Tennessee on their schedule. So now the Auburn game will be in October, and the Tennessee game will move back to November. And this has some traditionalists up in arms. People point back to this game being played in November since 1937, and certainly tradition is a huge part of what makes Georgia football and really SEC football so special. Every program that I've covered in the league, whether it was Auburn or Alabama, Tennessee, now Georgia, everyone has their traditions, and their traditions are what separate them. It's what makes the program special. There's certain games, certain memories that fans hold near and dear to their heart, players, coaches. And so when the schedule came out, the first thing a lot of people were concerned about was, gosh, did the SEC get Georgia to cave in again? Well, they couldn't be further from the truth. Kirby Smart is very good with this, and Greg McGarity works with Kirby. They work closely. You may have saw the comments from Kirby, at the board meeting last week. Kirby likes Greg McGarity. Greg McGarity likes Kirby. So Greg's kind of like the liaison to Kirby for the SEC. It makes sense for this game to be switched. Now, I'm not saying that the SEC shouldn't have given those 2 years back. Maybe that Auburn should have played at Georgia 2 years in a row in conjunction with moving the game up. But I just posted a story on Dog Nation about, how Kirby sees things that maybe we're not aware of. And certainly Greg McGarity does too. We weren't in the room. We don't know everything going on with the future of Georgia football any more than we know how that schedule is going to look when it actually comes out. It may come out, and Auburn fans may not like what they see. You never know. I know someone brought up the point a few days ago. Well, what if now that Auburn is in October, what if that means they play Alabama back-to-back? Because we know that traditionally Alabama has been a September-October game going back to like 1994. Did some digging. And I'd put it on your calendar, September 19th, 2020. Georgia's going to be in Tuscaloosa. I feel really strongly about that. You can take a look at Alabama's schedule. They've got some of those bye games, if you will, on the 12th and on the 26th. Georgia has Louisiana Monroe on the 26th. Sets up perfect for that game being the 19th. And I would guess strongly that the game will be the 19th. The earliest that Auburn could be is October 3rd. We've got an SEC source that told us the Auburn game will not be in September. So we know it's in October. So Georgia will have at least 2 weeks between Alabama and Auburn, maybe 3. I don't know if it's the 3rd or the 10th. I'm not sure about what else is on that schedule. But as for the reasons why Kirby Smart, and again, there's a lot of Georgia fans that want that game where it was. Kirby Smart is a Georgia fan. Kirby Smart is the head coach. Kirby Smart is trying to win a national championship. And so he's not going to be on board with anything that doesn't help Georgia win a championship. So the fact that Kirby and Greg McGarity are behind this lets you know that there's reasons for it. Now, sometimes, Kirby Smart says or does something something, and someone may disagree. What I've found, and again, I've only covered Kirby, for a year, but what I've found in this last year dealing with Kirby is everything. There's a reason for everything. He does nothing by chance. There's nothing that he overlooks. There's a reason why his star is on the rise. Why at 43 years old he's making $6 million a year, and he's arguably one of the top 2 or 3 coaches in the country. When you look at Georgia's results on the field, certainly on the recruiting trail, you look at the direction of the program under Kirby and McGarity and the buildings that are being built now, and the compliance has been strong. But as to the reasons why, I want to get to that, because there's some people that argue, well, why is it better? Well, first and foremost, Georgia's goal every year is to win the SEC East Division. And you may say, well, no kidding, right? Okay, so with that being the case, the Tennessee game is more important than the Auburn game. Okay, you can afford to lose the Auburn game more than you can lose the Tennessee game. And the reason why is because you might ultimately find yourself in a head-to-head tie with Tennessee. And if they beat you, then they get the nod in the SEC East Division. So that's a game, along with Florida, along with the East Division games are by and large more important than the West Division games in terms of winning the East Division. So by moving the game to November, I think it plays into Georgia's hands for 2 reasons. And I want to go back to something that Kirby said a couple of weeks ago on National Signing Day, when Paul Feinbaum asked him about the players that were going pro early. And Kirby brought up a great point. He looked into the future. I mean, he brought out the crystal ball for all of us to look into for Georgia football. And he said, here's what's happening. Okay, players are coming in earlier. More guys are enrolled earlier. What has Georgia got this year? 14 January enrollees. They're coming in earlier, but they're also leaving earlier. Okay, because they're coming in earlier, they're more prepared to play as freshmen. A lot less, considerably less redshirting. You just don't hardly see it at all anymore. So they're coming in earlier. They're getting the benefit of spring football drills, the benefit of that off-season conditioning, and they're more equipped to contribute earlier. So because of that, for them, playing 3 years is your freshman, sophomore, and junior year, as opposed to redshirt year, freshman, sophomore, junior year. We're on campus players. So players are coming and going earlier. The other thing, the new dynamic, is this NCAA transfer rule. More guys are going in the portal. If they don't play, they're leaving. Okay? So the conclusion that Kirby drew from those 2 factors is that the elite programs that have the high caliber players that are coming in earlier and leaving earlier, and also because they're high caliber players, if they don't play right away at Georgia, they could play right away somewhere else. Maybe they drop down to a second tier SEC level program, or they leave the conference and go to Conference USA or something like that where they can play immediately. Those 2 factors, Kirby said, are going to lead to younger and younger teams as time goes on. Well, all we got to do is look back to last season, and you tell me, when was Georgia playing their best football, right? They were pretty good in September, but they weren't really tested. We didn't really know. October, they got crowned by LSU. They got destroyed, right? But November, Georgia was playing their best football. A lot of young guys, like Jordan Davis, emerged as the season went on, got better, right? JJ, receiver, we saw him get better as the year went on. So if you're going to have a young team that's going to develop during the course of their freshman year and players contribute, right, they're going to be playing better in November than September, October. The other reason why Georgia is a better November team in terms of relative to other programs is because of that quality depth. Georgia's got so much competitive depth. It's unbelievable. First team, second team, third team. And part of it's the way Kirby develops them. He practices them all, and that's why. But also it's the recruiting Georgia's done. When you recruit as well as Georgia has, you're going to have a lot of talent on your roster. Therefore, when it's November, and all teams are going to have injuries, all things being equal, Georgia is going to match up favorably with Tennessee in November, more favorably in November, because Georgia has more depth, and they're not as susceptible to the problems that come about with injuries. Look at the job Sam Pittman did on that offensive line last year. I don't know many offensive lines that could have sustained the injuries that Georgia did with all those players going in and out. In fact, I think Isaiah Wilson, the freshman All-American, I believe, was the only player to start every single game and play every single game. So those two factors, that's why I said, on the surface, you go, I don't like it. Well, listen, Kirby Smart, you're in good hands. Kirby Smart's a good coach. He makes good decisions. And if you listen to the things that he said, one, that the program's going to be younger moving forward, and then you take a look at what that means, right? That team's going to develop as the year progresses because they're young, and the team's going to have more quality depth. You go, oh, wow, yeah, I guess that makes sense. They are a better team in November. Now, some people will just say, no, I don't like it. I'm not going to agree. It doesn't matter. I had someone say, this has been a tradition since 1937. Well, you know what's been a tradition since, the early 1980s? Not winning a national championship. And Kirby Smart wants to change that. And he was hired to change that. And so when a coach is making decisions that he feels are in the best interest of the program, you can disagree with it, but I think you got to tip your cap. I mean, look, I'm in the media. It's my job to second guess and be the doubting Thomas and be skeptical. But what I've seen with Kirby Smart, I'm at the point where I give him the benefit of the doubt. But this isn't a matter of giving him the benefit of the doubt. This is listening to what Kirby said and applying his logic to it. Do I believe that Georgia's going to have more players going pro in the future early? Yes, I do. Do I believe that Georgia will continue to recruit really well and have more depth than any program in the SEC? I absolutely do. So the fact that what Kirby said on the Feinbaum show about younger teams and how that matches up with what's happening, it makes sense. And if anybody is going to mess with tradition, I think Kirby Smart, a former player and Georgia fan himself, he'd be the first one to be careful and sensitive to that because Kirby bleeds red and black. So if Kirby didn't think that this was good, he wouldn't be on board with it. And Georgia wouldn't sign off, wouldn't feel good about it. But you take a look at what it does for Georgia and how it puts them in a better position with the SEC East Division by playing Tennessee in November instead of October, it makes sense. Because that's objective number one. If you don't win the East, you don't play in the SEC championship game. And if you don't play in the SEC championship game, and I know Alabama pulled it off once, but I don't think we're going to see that again. If you don't play in the league championship game, your chances of being invited to the college football playoff as things stand aren't very good. So Kirby was hired to win championships. Sometimes that requires change. There's that old saying, what got you here ain't going to get you there. Well, Georgia hasn't won a national championship. They were close. A couple years ago, but also what happened a couple years ago. They lost to Auburn in November. The other thing that Kirby said he wanted to avoid, and he said it as far back as Destin last spring, so that lets you know that this has been getting tossed around behind the scenes. He doesn't want to play back-to-back road games in Atlanta against Georgia Tech and Auburn, against two rivals. He doesn't want it. He came out and said it. Doesn't want to play Georgia Tech and Auburn in back-to-back weeks. Maybe it's the revenge factor. I do think that Georgia played off that loss to Auburn in the SEC championship game. And I think that if Georgia were to beat Auburn in the regular season and Auburn were to play them in the SEC title game, I think that gives Auburn, a little bit of an edge. But it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what the head coach thinks. And the head coach doesn't want to see Auburn and Georgia Tech in back-to-back weeks. And that told you everything you needed to know about where Kirby was with his switch. And McGarity said the same thing. He said, I'm sure he's fine with this. And today he had a comment in today's story you're going to want to read, McGarity talking about the fans. So you can check that out. But I know it's a touchy subject. I understand people get comfortable with going here then, and this is a tradition, and that's a tradition. But you know what? You know what else has changed since 1937? They didn't have an SEC championship game back then. They didn't have an East and a West division since then. So things have changed since 1937. Tradition's great. Nobody's talking about taking the G off the helmet or changing the team colors or changing the name on the stadium. Kirby's talking about, and Greg McGarity's talking about making a move that they feel is in the best interest of the program, or they don't make it. So I don't understand the word controversy is being thrown around. And again, I'm late to the party in the sense that I've only been around Kirby a year now, but it looks to me like he's doing a pretty good job. And it looks to me like he knows what he's talking about. And when I go over that Georgia campus and I compare it with other campuses I've been on, it looks to me like Georgia's got one of the top 2 or 3 campuses. And we know they have one of the top 2 or 3 academic schools in the SEC based on the ratings. And I can look at their won-loss record and tell you they're one of the top 2 or 3 programs in the league, and tell you that Kirby Smart's probably one of the top 2 or 3 coaches. So I put all that together and I say, why are people complaining? When you look at what Kirby and McGarity have done the 3 years they've been together, all I see is ascension. All I see is a program moving up. Now, there may be some things that have happened in the past. In fact, I know there are that didn't necessarily go well, that people are still upset about. But having seen other athletic administrations, whether it was when I covered Auburn, they were coming out of their probation with Eric Ramsey. None of their games were on television in 1993 because they were on probation. Pat Dye had just left Auburn at that point. Terry Bowden's first year. It was an 11-0 team, but boy, the winds were swirling. When I went to Alabama, I was there when Hootie Ingram got fired in the wake of Antonio Langham NCAA investigation. I did a lot of work on that NCAA investigation, followed a lot of stories, dealt with Bob Backrath, the new AD there, watched him and Gene Stallings clash. I think that led to a premature exit for Gene Stallings. I think a big part of his reason that he resigned was he wasn't on the same page with the new president and AD. And then certainly at Tennessee, I saw the Vols win a 98 national title with Doug Dickey, and then Dickey left and new administration came in. They changed the structure. A chancellor took over that wasn't qualified, and I saw Tennessee with absolutely horrible management for years. And you see where their program's at now. Now, I'm not saying that everything's perfect at Georgia. I don't think it's perfect anywhere. But when I look at where this program is at right now, it's on some pretty solid footing. I mean, I see McGarity and Kirby pulling the same end of the rope here and doing what they think is best, and the results back it up. Look, if Kirby Smart was 8-4 the first 3 years, okay, you could question it. But this guy has put Georgia on the doorstep of championships the last 2 seasons, and the program could be at its best this coming season. In fact, I think Georgia will win the SEC in 2019. And I think they got a good chance to win it in 2020 if Jake Fromm comes back for a senior year. That's a whole nother show. Not sure, what Jake's going to do. And if Kirby Smart feels like playing Tennessee in November, or doesn't care, or doesn't see any detriment to it, then I'm inclined to think he knows what he's talking about, because I know how competitive this guy is. You've seen the I Want to Eat video. I mean, he's a madman when it comes to winning. As much as he can stand in front of a room and talk like a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, Kirby behind the scenes can get pretty fired up with the guys, to put it mildly. And that's a strength, that you've got a guy that can get in there and get those guys fired up and knows how to push the buttons. And it ain't an act. Okay? Unbelievable competitor. We saw it when he played for Georgia. I don't know if he had the athleticism to be a 2-time All-SEC guy, but he was, because he was smart, because he was prepared, because he competed. So you've got this coach who played here, who has that competitive, almost insane streak, a little crazy to him when it comes to how competitive he is, who's got the flip side business CEO personality, vocabulary, appearance, ability to get in front of a room and explain what makes his program a success. And he's bringing the program in a direction. And I'm hearing people crying and moaning, we don't want to go. Listen, are you on the Kirby bus or aren't you? Are you signed up for what Kirby wants? Doesn't mean you got to like it, but are you signed up where you go, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with this, but I don't have any reason to doubt that Kirby Smart knows what he's doing. Are you signed up for that? Or do you think you know more than Kirby? Maybe you do. Maybe you do. Maybe they should invite the people to the board meetings or take write-in requests. But as things stand, and believe me, I have plenty of people that make it clear they know more than I do. And I welcome comments and feedback, but I'm not making $6 million, and I'm not Kirby Smart. Certainly, I couldn't do what he does, and I don't know many people that could. So I'm a little surprised, I guess, by the division and the debate, because to me, if Kirby Smart's down with this, there's a reason for it. He doesn't just sit back and let things happen, folks. That ain't Kirby. That's not how he works, I promise you. Everything is calculated. Everything. Nothing is left uncovered. It's not like he says to McGarity, hey, Greg, I'm going to be out on the golf course today. Just do whatever the hell you want with the schedule. No. It ain't happening. Kirby wants to know everything. He goes over every detail. And if you missed the start of this podcast where I explained why it gives Georgia an advantage and more likely to win the East, playing Tennessee in November rather than October, you can read the story. It's up on dognation.com. So that's my part on that. And by the way, I agree with Kirby's logic there. I agree with what Kirby's saying. I do think Georgia will get younger. I do think guys will continue to go pro early. I do think Georgia will be affected by the transfer portal than most teams because of the stockpile of talent. I agree with Kirby on all those things. And therefore, it's a logical conclusion that with a younger, deeper team, you're better playing a team in November than October. If you come into a different conclusion than that, when we're talking about youth and depth, then I don't know what to tell you. But those are some fundamental reasons why it makes sense that Kirby and McGarity are on board with this. Now, you can say, well, it helps Auburn more. It helps Tennessee. Maybe it does. But all Georgia cares about is what's good for Georgia. Okay, the unintended consequence is that it helps Auburn out. You know who it doesn't help out? And I give credit to one of the readers here, Mitch. Forgive me, Mitch. I forgot your last name. It doesn't help Alabama because now they're going to play a lot fresher Georgia team. Or excuse me, Auburn team. Auburn's not going to be having played Georgia 2 weeks before. So it actually hurts Alabama. I think Tennessee is the biggest winner in this. That's the unintended, because Tennessee played Florida and Georgia back to back. That's tough. That's their two biggest rivalries, and they had to play them back to back. So Tennessee is the big winner in this. But because of the reasons that Kirby talked about on the Paul Feinbaum show on signing day, I think Georgia wins too. And I think Georgia's going to be in really good shape playing Tennessee in November because Tennessee is not going to have that sort of depth. And believe me, I covered a Tennessee team in 2016, and you saw what happened. They started 5-0 and were ranked number 7 under Butch Jones, and they started having injuries, and 5-0 turned into 9-4 real quick. So, and although Jeremy Pruitt and that staff, I think, are doing a good job recruiting, they're not going to be able to match Georgia's depth by 2020. I don't see it. Not quality or competitive depth. So those are all the reasons why it makes sense. Now let's go ahead and flip the script here a little bit. NFL draft is coming up. First thing, NFL Combine this week. Georgia has 9 players that will be there. 8 of them will be working out. DeAndre Walker probably will not do field drills. DeAndre, of course, had that surgery on January 23rd, double sports hernia. Excuse me, not double sports hernia, just a sports hernia. So he won't be doing the field drills. He's hoping to be ready to do the drills by March 20th, which is Georgia's tentative date for their pro day when all the NFL teams will come to Athens. So what to look for? Well, today there's a story up on Dog Nation that Georgia has 3 players that are ranked in the top 5 at their positions. Those players are DeAndre Baker, who's the number 3 rated corner, Isaac Nauta, who's the number 4 rated tight end, and Riley Ridley, who's the number 5 rated wide receiver. This is Bucky Brooks. He's a writer, former NFL player and NFL scout who now writes for NFL.com. I think that sounds about right. Look, it's all kind of it's a very fluid progress, first of all. The scouts start with the game film. They come and watch some practices as well. And then there's the all-star games. Terry Godwin, I thought, really helped himself out. He had that MVP performance in the East-West Shrine game. Lamont Gaillard was also there. Saw some positive reports on him. I know Jonathan Ledbetter helped himself out at the Senior Bowl. DeAndre Walker was supposed to go there, but the sports hernia kicked up and he wasn't able to go. DeAndre Baker declined his invitation to go compete against Deebo Samuel one more time there. That would have been fun to watch. I think Baker's stock has slipped since then. I think he would have helped himself going there, but he would have been at risk of injury. Same reason why he skipped the Sugar Bowl. He skipped the Senior Bowl. He doesn't want to get injured. I think he feels pretty confident that he's a first-round draft pick. Now, where he goes in the first round, whether or not Riley Ridley can jump to the first round, going to have to do with their times at the combine. The league relies heavily on metrics. And while the metrics aren't the end-all, be-all, they've proven out over time, or the NFL wouldn't continue to use them and find so much value in the combine. It's one of the things we've got to look for with Elijah Holyfield. You heard my criticisms early in the season. I didn't feel like Elijah Holyfield had the straight line speed. You know what, though? As the season progressed, he showed so much toughness and great lateral quickness, that I didn't necessarily see in the fall drills or in the early games that I do think now he's going to find his way on a roster. One of the things I learned about Elijah Holyfield is just how competitive he is, what a team player he is, plays special teams. He'll go down there on special teams. He'll hit you. He's a guy everybody loves in the locker room. Every team's want a guy like that. So, while 5'10" and 215 and a 4.5 40 is a dime a dozen in the NFL, the other things that a guy like Elijah Holyfield brings, teams want. And so I think he'll find his way on a roster. I don't know where he'll be drafted. Again, that's where the combine is going to be so important for Elijah. Now, if he runs a low 4.4 number, all bets are off. And the speed came in, and that's what these guys. That's why they invest their time and go to whether it's South Florida or where DeAndre Baker is training, or Jonathan Ledbetter is training, or whether it's Texas where McCole Hardman's been training, or Los Angeles where Jason Stanley's been training. There's another guy, 6'3", 207, willing to do whatever the coach asks him to do. And I did a story on that about, how Jason, grew up at Georgia and learned the main thing, and really benefited from Kirby Smart, and a guy who's going to battle. And I had a thought the other night watching one of those, the new AAFL league. Those are new jobs for people. Those guys that you see playing in that league, and maybe it's not the best football, but those are jobs that weren't there before. And that gives players another opportunity to develop their skill set. And so I think that's good news for Georgia in general. Georgia's got a lot of good players. You can have as many as, I'd say, 8 guys drafted would be my over-under for Georgia. And it'll be interesting to see how they come out at the combine this week in Indianapolis. Very important. I'll finish up with some basketball talk now. The stuffed bulldog judgment call. The referees can do that. McGarity addressed it afterward. He said, hey, it's a judgment call. Don't got to like it. Georgia's going to handle that behind closed doors. Obviously, they talk with the league office. I'll be honest with you. There were a couple other calls that I didn't like in the last 2 minutes of that game that I thought were a lot worse than the stuffed bulldog. There was some call on Claxton. There was a ball that went out of bounds. And I just said, boy, Georgia is not getting a whistle here. It seemed like every call went against him in that 1-point loss to Mississippi State. And then the Ole Miss game Saturday. It was another heartbreaking defeat. We saw Tyreek Crump with the final shot. They inbounded it to Claxton. He was triple teamed. Ole Miss came out in a 1-3-1 zone. Claxton dished it out, maybe a little trigger late to Crump. The shot was just off. It was so close. And, I know everybody hoped that Georgia would get that win as hard as those guys were playing. And then before the game, we found out that, some Ole Miss players took a knee during the national anthem. The Georgia players and personnel did not. But what happened was that there was a march going on with Confederate supporters in reference to the removal of Confederate emblems that were once part of the Ole Miss. I don't know if culture is the right word, but they were more associated with Ole Miss, and so the players protested against the American flag because they didn't like the protest that was going on in Oxford that day. And there's all sorts of stories on that. We did one story on it. It happened. It was a national story. Georgia was there. The Georgia players didn't kneel. They probably didn't even know that the protest was going on in Oxford. Certainly, it was nothing that Tom Crean wasted any breath on. But not to say it wasn't a serious topic, but Georgia was there, and therefore, they were part of the scene, I guess you'd say. So I don't know how everybody feels about that, but we did a story on that as well, and it makes you wonder now if the SEC office, just like football, the teams aren't out there for the national anthem. I think in part to avoid, potential for the controversial, whether you were maybe not controversial. It depends on, I guess, if you think it's controversial or not. But maybe now basketball teams won't come out of the tunnel until after the national anthem. I don't know. Not really sure. But again, a lot to talk about today. I've really enjoyed doing this today. There's been a lot to discuss. I know that not everyone agrees. I can just share my point of view based on the reporting that I do and my observations. There's people, that have their points of view that are going to be different. It's all a matter of perspective. And so I've covered, like I said, this is the fourth SEC team I've covered over the course of my career. I guess I'm getting kind of old here, but, that's dating back to 1993 that I've covered 4 programs. And glad that I have, and really enjoy covering Georgia. I can tell you that the people at Georgia are first class, and everybody's been so good to me. And the culture here is as healthy as anywhere that I've been. And so whenever I hear the fan base is divided about something, I'm kind of like, man, you got a lot of great things going on here. These are small pickings. I've seen big problems at other schools. I've had to document it, and I don't see it happening in Georgia right now. So that's my thought for the day. Happy Monday. Hope you're getting some sunshine. Appreciate you joining me here on the Ingles on the Beat segment. Give me a follow on Twitter at Mike Griffith 32. I really enjoy those interactions. I post my stories on Twitter, and every now and then I weigh in with a thought, or I'll retweet things that I find interesting. Today I had a retweet on the Tucson Police Department finding snow and a white substance that they weren't sure what it was, but some fun things as well. So at Mike Griffith 32 on Twitter. Certainly you can email me at MikeGriffith032@gmail and comment on this video, and I'll try and respond to your comments. I know that they're not all going to be real nice. If you disagree, that's fine. But try and be a little bit nicer about it sometimes. Sports writers have feelings too, I guess. Again, thanks for joining me today. I'll have a lot to write this week. You're going to enjoy the coverage on DogNation.com. Have a great Monday, everybody.